displacement and the targeting of humanitarian workers.
في غزة حتى الآن
At least 297 humanitarian workers have been killed in Gaza so far. These are war crimes, and we must all work on holding the perpetrators responsible. Humanitarian workers are not obligated to risk their lives to provide assistance to those in need, and it is our obligation to provide them with protection and enable them to carry out their noble functions without fear or threat.
نحن نقف على أعتاب البدء في حملة تطعيم أطفال غزة.
The polio vaccination campaign of the children of Gaza will start soon. This is a disease that was eradicated from the Gaza Strip over 25 years ago. However, the Israeli destruction machine guaranteed its return. It was also the cause of the collapse of the health system in Gaza through the deliberate targeting of hospitals and health workers.
ناقوس الخطر لأن احتمالية انتشار الأمراض والأوبئة
given the high possibility of the spread of diseases, including cholera,
مع غرق مناطق من غزة في مياه الصرف الصحي وتكدس النفايات الصلبة
and as solid waste is piling up as the result of the absence of basic services since the start of the Israeli aggression.
أن ننسى أن العدوان الإسرائيلي هو من أعاد هاجس انتشار هذه الأمراض إلى غزة وباعتباره القوى القائمة بالاحتلال تقع عليه مسؤولية سلامة المشاركين في حملة التطعيمات ونجاحها ونحذر من أي عرقلة أو استهداف للمشاركين فيها. وفي هذا السياق تشكر بلادي كل من اليونسف ومنظمة الصحة العالمية ووكالة الأونروا لدورها في تنظيم هذه العملية وحرصها على ضمان تلقيح ما يزيد عن 640,500 طفل فلسطيني. نقدر صعوبة الظروف التي تعملون فيها ونحيي فيكم حرصكم على أداء مهامكم برغم كل التحديات كما تشدد بلادي على الدور المحوري للأونروا في إنجاح حملة التطعيم فهي متدخلة في كافة مراحل العملية ومن المتوقع أن 40% من الأطفال سيتم تطعيمهم من خلال الوكالة. هي العمود الفقري للعمل الإنساني بغزة ولا بديل عنها رغم محاولة البعض تجاوزها أو تقزيم دورها. فأزيد من 1,000 موظف من موظفي الوكالة يشاركون في حملة التطعيم لكن هذا الجهد المبارك يحتاج وقفا لإطلاق النار فآليات خفض التصعيد لا تعمل بغزة وهي غير ذات فائدة. لذا نؤكد على أهمية وقف إطلاق النار فوراً وتمكين العاملين الإنسانيين من القيام بمهامهم. لا بد لحملة التطعيم أن تنجح وعلينا ضمان توفير الظروف الملائمة لذلك. في الختام سيد الرئيس يقع على مجلس الأمن واجب حماية الفلسطينيين ووضع حد لغطرسة الاحتلال الإسرائيلي وإيجاد حل دائم وعادل للقضية الفلسطينية. إن ما يحدث اليوم بغزة من إبادة والتصعيد بالضفة الغربية مع تمادي سلطات الاحتلال في تدنيس المسجد الأقصى الهدف منها هو القضاء على إمكانية إقامة الدولة الفلسطينية. لذا فإن رد المجموعة الدولية ومجلس الأمن خاصة يجب أن يكون من خلال خطوات عملية وفعالة لضمان إقامة الدولة الفلسطينية وعاصمتها القدس الشريف. النهج الوحيد لضمان سلام عادل ودائم في المنطقة. شكرا سيد.
I thank the representative of Algeria for their statement. I give the floor to the representative of Japan.
Thank you, Mr. President. First of all, I thank the United Kingdom and Switzerland for proposing this timely meeting, and also express gratitude Acting USG Masuya and Deputy Director General of WHO, Dr. Ryan, for their sobering updates. The humanitarian situation in Gaza is beyond description. Repeated evacuation orders have left Palestinians crammed into unlivable conditions, deprived of basic essentials and dignity. The so-called safe zones are nothing of the sort. Humanitarian aid workers and United Nations personnel must be protected at all times. We need to stress this point, especially when we see the vaccination operations are starting. Yet, they are being exposed to intolerable risks. It is totally unacceptable that UN aid vehicles in Gaza continue to be fired upon. Japan deploys a WFP vehicle carrying humanitarian cargo to central Gaza was struck by gunfire earlier this week. This incident has led to the suspension of WFP's vital operations. Clearly, deconfliction mechanisms are still woefully insufficient. We are also deeply concerned that the IDF recently gave just a few hours' notice to more than 200 UN personnel to move out of Deir al-Balah. This has impaired a crucial humanitarian hub at a critical juncture. Mr. President, Japan welcomes the news today of an agreement to a series of short-term pauses in fighting to allow for the vaccination of Gaza's population against polio. All actors must work towards securing the safe and timely delivery of vaccines, especially to children. Yet the start of vaccination does not change the fact that immediate and permanent ceasefire and massive humanitarian aid are absolutely necessary. We strongly support the joint statement by the leaders of the United States, Egypt, and Qatar issued earlier this month, and the diplomatic efforts made by these three countries. We call on all parties, especially Hamas, to finally conclude a deal in line with Security Council Resolution 2735. Failure to achieve one will prolong the agony of all the people in Gaza, as well as the hostages. It also risks further instability, as seen by the Israeli operation in the West Bank that began on Wednesday, and the escalation of the hostilities between Israel and Hezbollah across the blue line over the weekend. We urge all parties, especially those in the region, to exercise maximum restraint. Again, we reiterate the ceasefire must happen now to achieve the release of hostages, the delivery of humanitarian aid at scale, and the calming down of the situation in Gaza and beyond. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of Japan for their statement. I shall now make a statement in my capacity as the representative of Sierra Leone. I thank the United Kingdom and Switzerland for requesting this meeting. And I also thank Acting Under-Secretary General Ms. Joyce Musuya and WHO Deputy Director General Dr. Mike Ryan for their valuable and sobering briefing, provided in the current context marked by uncertainty and rapid changes in the situation in the Gaza Strip and occupied Palestinian territory. Recent reports from the occupied Palestinian territory convey a high sense of fear and desperation, not only among the Palestinians, but also among humanitarian personnel, who for the past 11 months have been operating under very challenging conditions, with high risk to their safety and security. We are deeply concerned about the reported incident in the West Bank, which continues to be a prime target for the IDF. The IDF's massive military operation yesterday reportedly claimed over 10 civilian lives and left many injured in Tall Camp and other locations. The humanitarian situation continues to deteriorate, and operations of the United Nations and other humanitarian personnel are becoming even more challenging. The latest evacuation notice from the IDF to the United Nations on the 25th of August, instructing the evacuation of about 200 personnel from their offices and residents in Deir al-Balah, a place referred to as a crucial humanitarian hub, has created widespread fear and panic. It reportedly impacts 15 UN and NGO premises, as well as 4 UN warehouses. As briefed by Dr. Ryan, and as rightly stated by the UN and other humanitarian agencies, such actions are especially concerning at this point when the humanitarian community is set to roll out 2 rounds of massive polio vaccine campaigns across the Gaza Strip for over 640,000 children at risk of being infected with variant type 2 polio virus. Also, as briefed by Acting Undersecretary General Musuya, and as indicated by OCHA, 16 evacuation orders have been released in August only, directly affecting approximately 12% of Gaza's population. In total, since the 7th October 2023 to date, 88.5% of the Gaza Strip have been placed under evacuation orders. And for most areas in Gaza, this has happened multiple times. Persistent hostilities and insecurity continue to aggravate human suffering, create social unrest, and increase trauma, regional instability, and global tensions, with dire consequences for civilians, including women and children, especially the sick, pregnant women, lactating mothers, and their babies. The destructive effect of this prolonged conflict on critical civilian infrastructures, particularly hospitals and medical centers, as well as energy, water, and sewage facilities, coupled with deliberate man-made administrative and physical barriers and obstructions, is making humanitarian interventions increasingly difficult. As stated by Special Coordinator Tom Wennesland in last week's briefing, and I quote, "If these unacceptable conditions are allowed to prevail, humanitarian operations in Gaza will continue to fall short of meeting the massive needs of the population," end of quote. This is now a reality that needs to be corrected immediately. Colleagues, in view of the foregoing, Sierra Leone would like to emphasize the following. Firstly, we draw the attention of parties to the conflict to Resolution 2720, Operative Paragraph 13, amongst others, that state, and I quote, demands that all parties to the conflict take all appropriate steps to ensure the safety and security of UN and associated personnel, those of its specialized agencies, and all other personnel engaged in humanitarian relief activities consistent with international humanitarian law, without prejudice to the freedom of movement and access, stresses the need not to hinder these efforts, and recalls that humanitarian relief personnel must be respected and protected, end of quote. We therefore condemn the reported IDF attack on an WFP convoy in the Gaza Strip and repeat the need for the establishment of a functioning deconfliction mechanism. Secondly, Sierra Leone strongly support the Secretary General's and other humanitarian agencies' appeal for an immediate humanitarian pause to be observed that will allow for the safe, unhindered, and uninterrupted administration of the 2 rounds of polio vaccine. We also reject all forms of disinformation and misinformation about the potency of the vaccines, which poses a significant threat to public health and undermine global vaccination efforts. Thirdly, we condemn Israel's military's operation in the West Bank, particularly since the International Court of Justice has unambiguously declared that Israel's ongoing occupation and accession of the Palestinian territory is unlawful. We remain unwavering in our commitment to ongoing diplomatic efforts, with the hope that with the commitment being exhibited by the mediators, Egypt, Qatar, and the United States, the unresolved differences will soon be addressed, and this will cumulatively lead to a deal that will ensure a permanent ceasefire, the release of hostages, and unhindered humanitarian assistance. Let me close by reminding parties to the conflict to unreservedly adhere to their obligations under international law, including international humanitarian law. We also stress the imperative for accountability. Sierra Leone pledges its full support to all meaningful actions geared towards addressing the immediate and long-term causes of this conflict that will set the stage for a political horizon of a 2-state solution with Israel and Palestine living side by side in peace, security, and stability. Thank you. I resume my function as President of the Council. The representative of the United States has asked for the floor to make a further statement. I give them the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. My apologies for taking the floor once again, but I do need to respond to the remarks made by the representative of the Russian Federation. Our Russian colleague's long-winded statement contained little about the usual politicization of this tragic conflict in Gaza. He rambled on with his usual anti-U.S. rhetoric, sounding like the representative of a bitter, angry, attention-seeking state, which, by the way, is in the midst of a war of aggression against the people of Ukraine in flagrant violation of the United Nations Charter. To be very frank, his country contributes nothing to resolving the conflict in Gaza and seems not to fully understand its complications. So instead, he bemeans the work of the US, Qatar, and Egypt, who are trying and working valiantly to end this conflict. So, while he and his government continue the empty anti-US diatribe, we and our Egyptian and Qatari partners will work to bring about a true end to this extremely tragic war in Gaza and bring the hostages home. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of the United States for their statement. The representative of the Russian Federation has asked for the floor to make a further statement. I give them the floor.
Спасибо, господин председатель. Я вынужден отреагировать to the nervous statement, the outburst from our U.S. colleague. Of course, we have become accustomed to the United States in all incidents trying to place all blame on others, to shift the blame. But I would like him to provide us with details about the basis on which he asserts that the Russian Federation has done nothing in order to prevent and stop and end the conflict in Gaza. I would like to recall that on the 16th of October last year, the Russian Federation tabled a draft resolution with a demand for an immediate ceasefire. On the 18th of October, your delegation, for the first time, vetoed this demand. And in all, the U.S. delegation cast the veto 5 times. 40,000 residents, 5 vetoes. That's the cost, the tangible cost of your actions. You allege that you have been carrying out effective negotiations to reach a deal between Hamas and Israel. You have indeed been engaged in these resolutions. However, they are completely fruitless. Since at that time, another 3,000 Palestinians have died. That is the specific, tangible cost, Mr. Representative, the cost of your words and of your delays. Perhaps you will make an effort, instead of this, to at least explain to us in this chamber what modifications the United States has proposed for the deal with Hamas, which accommodates Israel, about which we know nothing. We have already repeatedly been demanding that we receive this information because Resolution 2735 has concrete parameters in it, and we cannot step beyond those parameters. And in all of these times, you have been misleading the Council. Could you kindly respond to my question? Thank you.
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation for their statement. The representative of the United States has asked for the floor to make a further statement. I give them the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I apologize once again. To my Russian colleague, you have been in this chamber, you or your permanent representative, in all of these discussions. You know exactly what our positions were with regard to each of these resolutions and what we insisted on and what we thought was really going to be necessary to actually make progress in trying to bring an end to this war. So I don't need to sit here and explain to you why the U.S. did what it did with regard to these resolutions. You know quite well. And I think everybody in this room does, because we've been very clear about that. So in terms of what we're trying to do on the ground with our Egyptian and Qatari partners is to try to take that framework that was agreed by Israel and from what we understand, Hamas, and to try to make sure that we can get full implementation of it. Implementation is the issue here. The framework is there. It's the implementation. And Hamas, at many, many times, has changed its views on some of the steps that were previously agreed on. So what we are trying to do is effectively fill those gaps and work with the parties to do that. So you can sit here and criticize the United States for all the steps it has and hasn't taken, but we have been committed from the beginning and have done more, frankly, than your government has done to try to end this war. And we will continue to work. So you're more than welcome if you want to, sit there and, use another opportunity, as you do at every occasion, to attack the U.S. for this or for that. You certainly, that's your right to do that. But we are going to do the serious work of trying to end this conflict and not sit here and start blaming the world for what's going on. This is a very, very deep and challenging and long-standing conflict, and we are working and have worked harder than your government has at any point to try to end this overall conflict. So my recommendation to you and your government would be, if you're going to contribute something positively, then contribute it. If not, you should be quiet. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the United States for their statement. The representative of the Russian Federation has asked for the floor to make a further statement. I give them the floor.
Я хотел бы сказать уважаемому коллеге американскому, чтобы он свои рекомендации мне и моему правительству оставил при себе. Наконец-то занялся тем, чем Соединенные Штаты должны заняться. Не мешать Совету Безопасности работать над урегулированием палестино-израильского досье. Все в этом зале прекрасно понимают, что именно Соединенные Штаты несут основную ответственность за то, что происходит в Газе сейчас. 40 тысяч жителей — это не просто аморфные цифры, это конкретные человеческие трагедии. И если у остальных моих коллег не хватает смелости сказать вам это в лицо, то у меня с этим проблем нет. Вот и живите с этим дальше. Спасибо.
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation for their statement. There are no more names inscribed on the list of speakers. The meeting is adjourned.